label organization right now is criticizing refugee camps in Jordan, saying it's very bad because some of these people are working, even though it's illegal, and that's hurting poor people in Jordan who have to compete. So those sorts of stories need to be, it's part of the minimum wage debate here. Those need to be, there needs to be some common sense with that. Your question back there? No? Okay. So the next deal is showing this few-minute video, and again, it's focusing on enterprise, and it's also critical of the foreign aid establishment, the United Nations, these groups that sort of benefit from the status quo, even though they're in the job of helping. They've got jobs, they're earning money by this. Okay.
Another increase in poor nation aid. The World Bank said yesterday that it would almost triple lending this year to help prevent a, quote, human crisis in developing countries amid the turmoil in financial markets.
Machiavelli said, the reason there will be no change is because the people who stand to lose from change have all the power. And the people who stand to gain from change have none of the power. Machiavelli was describing the global aid system today.
We can't continue to talk about the tragedy of poverty and not talk about aid. Over $2 trillion have been spent on aid.
Aid creates dependency. More aid and more aid and more aid.
We've seen that aid has subsidized dictators, encouraged inefficiency. Most of the money for aid doesn't actually get to the poor.
Aid has delayed the development of business in Africa. It has kept Africa behind.
It becomes a way of colonizing the economies of the poor countries, a system of economic slavery.
You create that parental relationship. It's patron-client, it's master-slave, it's all broken.
These are the strategies of the last 50 years, and they failed for 50 years, and they're going to continue to fail. It's time to change.
If the African nations today agreed together and say no more aid, I tell you they can grow slowly, but they can grow.
Economic transformation in the long term come from locally run, locally owned businesses.
We need to transform our good intentions into things that actually work. And what works is allowing these individual human beings, created in the image and likeness of God, to create value and prosperity for themselves.
We are working to train people into entrepreneurship and be disciples of God in transforming their own nation.
I've seen that. I've seen that through my business.
Nobody owes us anything. You don't expect the whole world to be able to address your own problems. We are here to meet up front these challenges we face.
Entrepreneurship should become something that is the language and the life of our day-to-day people.
To create capacities in people, to empower them to be able to stand on their own.
People have lots of energy, lots of capacity.
Business is the normative way in which people rise out of poverty, not state-to-state aid, not the largesse of politicians and bureaucrats. It might not be very romantic to think that it's just humdrum business, but it's true.
These people are the engine of growth. They are changing slums into cities.
Instead of training job seekers, we train job makers.
A sense of independence, a sense of human dignity.
Confidence,
knowledge,
empowerment,
opportunity,
character,
responsibility,
hard work,
vision,
self-esteem,
the new moral purpose,
abundance of life. Economies can grow.
Anything is possible.
And it's high time we stop telling our people they can't do it. Yes, we shall do it in the name of God.
Okay, the documentary continues for another few minutes with examples from different countries. Again, it's more Latin America, Africa based, but one of the people featured in there is Hernando de Soto. And Hernando de Soto's documentary on the Middle East called Locked Out, I'm going to show a few clips from that, applies these same ideas there. Now, these are not the ideas of the State Department, of the Department of Defense, of US aid agencies, not because they're necessarily against them or that they're bad people. It's just not the things they do. So aid is something for temporary disasters, you know, tsunamis, hurricanes, you know, in war territory, you know, you want to help people, but instead you want to look at how enterprises can allow people to help themselves. Okay, now the flip side of this is there's people who benefit a lot from the status quo, from these aid agencies. But comparing aid to enterprise, again, aid can help, but overall foreign aid has been a hindrance, and it's not because it's just a waste of money, it's because the money goes to the government and it actually funds people who block development. So the dysfunction of the Middle East is both the aid revenue. I mean, for Egypt gets what, $1 billion a year from the United States and has forever, that goes mostly to the government, 160 million for, I don't know if it's 160 million or 1.6 billion for armaments, for weapons. But this money goes to the government. The Egyptian government also gets money from rent from the Suez Canal, from tourism, and this money flows to the state, and partly through that they don't allow enterprise. They don't need it. The money goes to the elites. Oil revenue is another sort. So there's books on this. This is the after-war book by Chris Coyne I mentioned. His new book is called Doing Bad by Doing Good. And he offers empirical evidence on how NGOs cause harm, make things worse. Even they're not, let's say, as bad as government in some ways, but still it's not the sort of way that allows people to create wealth on their own, just in general. So he discusses that there. William Easterly is one of the best sources on this, The Tyranny of Experts. If you think about what U.S. policy has been toward the Middle East and UN policy over decades, it's been population control. So when you read the history, you read the U.S. trying to assist the governments in lowering population growth rates. It's been experts on the top trying to figure out how to do business planning. Just as an overview, there's a great documentary called The Commanding Heights. Anybody seen The Commanding Heights? It was a very popular documentary shown on PBS in the 1990s, early 2000s. 6-hour documentary on economics. I know you're saying, gosh, I can't wait till I get home so I can watch the 6 hours of economics documentaries. But it tells the story of the fall of communism and the response to it, and it tells the story of the battle of ideas. Should government step in and manage the economy, or should it be the private sector? Just briefly the story, the communists take over in the Soviet Union. The Bolsheviks take charge. They totally communize the economy. Government takes over anything. They abolish currency based on Marxist ideas. The economy collapses, completely collapses. People are starving. Lenin responds to this by advocating free market reforms. This is so bizarre. Lenin, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, is the free market reformer. He puts in the new economic policy in Russia, and he's attacked by the left-wing Bolsheviks. This is the story they tell in The Commanding Heights. And these market reforms allow the Soviet economy to resurge, to bounce back. Lenin basically says, and again, he's criticized, he stands up at the Third International and viciously attacks his critics. He says, you idiots, you fools, let the little people have their businesses. Let the shopkeepers have their shops. Let the farmers have their farms. We will control the commanding heights of the economy. We'll control the steel industry, the railroad industry, the shipping industry. The government controls the commanding heights. Let the little people have their shops. So that was Lenin's reform. It led to a resurgence in the Soviet economy. Then he dies. Stalin comes in and liquidates all these guys again. You know, if they hadn't been killed the first time, they got killed the second time. But this idea of government controlling the commanding heights of the economy is the key to economics in the Middle East. because those ideas were so popular they spread around the world in the 1920s and 30s. In England, after World War II, the British government took over the commanding heights of the British economy. That's why you have British Steel, British Railroad, British Airlines, British Telecom, British Leyland. The government nationalized these countries, these companies. All around the world, the government took over the companies. Fascism is basically government controlling the commanding heights. In the US, we had the New Deal, where the government took over the commanding heights of the US economy through cartels. So they would appoint, a big oil guy to run the oil industry. So these cartels were seen as modern economics, as what could help us grow faster. Okay, so that's background story. Move to the Middle East. Saddam Hussein is a member of the Ba'ath Party, which is the commanding heights party, the fascist party that said government should control the economy. Same with Nasser in Egypt, that these ideas were government experts who are highly trained at Cambridge, Oxford, or Harvard, or Princeton, whether you're in Africa, India, or the Middle East, the government will control this part of the economy. And those ideas is what the commanding heights is about, and those ideas have basically failed. So under Thatcher, the British government got rid of all those industries. The US, we backed out of the New Deal. But these sort of stories, it's in the developing world, it's still part of this commanding heights story of the government managing the economy. Oops, I went the wrong way. Okay. So I don't have time to cover economics. If you want to read more about this, a great source is the Economic Freedom of the World Index. The Economic Freedom of the World Indexes, there's 2 indexes. They study every country in the world with data, and they try and show that economic freedom leads to wealth. You can find the Economic Freedom of the Arab World, the 2003 index. This is a great resource because country by country it tells you how that economy is working, and it goes over the wealthiest countries and what the story is there. I have an article about Bahrain in the front of the study guide. Bahrain's the freest country in the Middle East, but also doesn't allow civil liberties and attacks, Shia on the streets who are the majority. Economic theory says economic freedom will improve prosperity. So the indexes test this theory, and I encourage you to read more about it. So what would U.S. policy be? Promote economic freedom. Yeah.
Okay, so what should, I guess my question then is, so Bahrain's an example of a place that has economic freedom that still has an extremely oppressive regime. The government's very divided down the middle. There's a lot of sectarian violence. There's a lot of religious violence. So obviously, a policy of economic freedom towards Bahrain wouldn't do much good because they're already got that economic freedom.
Well, but why would people of different religions or ethnic groups fight in Bahrain? What is it they want? And what you'll find is the government still controls a big part of the economy. So they're finding that Shia can't get access to jobs or education the way Sunni can or the way other groups can. So the policy toward Bahrain would be say the government should get smaller, should back up. But if they had prosperity, if they had a freer system, the everyday people would have more jobs.